Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Empower Your Mobile app for Adobe Experience Platform. I just basically want to take you through a session where we are going to explore how you can set up your mobile app and make it work with Adobe Experience Platform. And we go through a lot of steps there. We have, as you can see, myself as the presenter, but also very importantly, Paul van Oosterhout as being the moderator. So he will monitor the chat, and if you have any questions, then please put them in the chat, and we will make sure that we keep some 10 minutes at the end to answer those questions. The plan was also to have Wouter van Geluwe, very familiar to most of you, I guess, to have some answers to questions that were raised during previous Tech Academies, but unfortunately he cannot be available today. So he will postpone that answering in the next session. So with that being said, let's kick this one off. Let me just make my presentation a little bit smaller so I can basically go into a modus where we are going into this session. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore an app that we've set up in Adobe itself, using solution consultants amongst us, to actually see what is really entailed to make a mobile app work with the Adobe Experience Platform. Let me just basically show you the app in a brief synopsis. The app consists of a couple of screens. It basically allows you to configure the app in a way with a configuration file where you can actually make sure that it basically displays a specific brand and also uses a couple of other artifacts like a product catalog. So if I click on products here, then I can actually see a couple of products being loaded from a JSON file somewhere in the cloud. I can then move into those products and look at the products like as a product view event. Add those products to the basket. As you can see over here, and even purchase them. I can also have some personalized content in the app. Those personalized contents coming from our offer decisioning management on one end, but also coming from Adobe Target on the other end. And then what we also have in the app is location capabilities. So we can actually use geofence capabilities and determine a geofence area, click on that geofence area, and then actually simulate that we are in the neighborhood of that specific geofence by using the entry or the exit button. And the same is valid, for beacons. So we can actually configure beacons. You can see that here in the configuration file. Now, all this configuration is not so relevant, because that is really for us to repurpose this app for multiple brands. What we are really going to look at is, okay, how do you really set up this app and make it work with Adobe Experience Platform and the Adobe Experience Cloud solutions? So that's what we're going to do. And if I go back to my slides here, what I first want to focus on is the overall architecture. You have probably seen in other Tech Academy sessions these kind of drawings and visualizations about how everything works together in Adobe Experience Platform. From basically getting data in and out and working with the Adobe Experience Cloud solutions and other solutions. For the mobile app, I basically simplified this a little bit, and this is basically our drawing board to work from. So what you will see here in the middle is our Adobe Experience Platform with the real-time customer profile and the data lake. There we have the Adobe Experience Platform Edge on the left-hand side that basically takes care of consuming data from all kind of insight platforms like apps or web or whatever, and then configure data streams, etc., to make sure that the data lands in the Adobe Experience Platform. The app itself has to be facilitated with the Mobile SDK. We will talk about that as well, but also needs some configuration that we set up in Adobe Experience Platform Data Collection, formerly known as Adobe Launch. And to make the app not only collect data, but also activate data, we want to actually make it work with Journey Optimizer and Adobe Target, as you saw in that personalization capability that we showed as part of the app. So if you look at that architecture and you look at our various components, then you can actually distill, I would say, different responsibilities for people that are building this app in its totality. You can argue that there are people, being busy with setting up the data part of the app, the data foundation, so to speak. And we will focus in the first instance of this session on that area. Then you can say relevant parts could also be done by marketeers. And then, we'll take a look at what the marketeer can do for building this app. And then obviously at the end, you have people that have to build the app themselves, the implementers, the app developers, and we will focus in the last part of the session on that area. So let's focus first on the data foundation part of the app. And for that, the first step that you really need to do is set up schemas and data sets. So if I go into Adobe Experience Platform and go into the schema area, you will see that we are using here some demo system, Adobe demo system schemas that we've set up, using our demo facilities. But if you are building this from scratch, you obviously have to set up your schemas for a mobile app for both profile and experience events. And the core, functionality is that you actually keep track of, I would say, specific mobile capabilities. Like here, for example, the push notification tracking, make sure that field group is embedded in your schema. And if I go back into the profile part of the schema, so the profile schema, here it was. If I go into the profile schema here, then what you will see is that there is also an area called push notification details that actually takes care of, for example, registering your push token device as part of your profile, so that that specific app on your device is part of your whole profile capability. So that's upfront, the most important thing I would almost say that you take care of, setting up your schemas. And obviously, this is out of the box schemas, a sort of demo schema, but you can actually tailor your schema in such a way that it actually collects, the relevant parts of your mobile app that you want to collect and take use of in the rest of the solutions. And obviously, with that schemas come data sets that you need to set up as well, associated with those schemas. I sort of anticipate that you have an understanding about how that works from previous sessions, but as you can see, we have an event data set for the mobile app and a profile data set for the mobile app, so that the actual data can really move into Adobe Experience Platform. So that's the first bit. And if I go back to the slides here, we've actually taken care of setting up the schemas and the data set. So we can now collect data and make sure that the data comes in from the app and lands into Adobe Experience Platform. But that's not completely true though, because if you really look at the Adobe Mobile SDK, what it really does in the end is it's only sending data to the Adobe Experience Platform Edge network. So we need a second component to ensure that the data lands in Adobe Experience Platform or in any other kind of Adobe solution, like for example, Adobe Target or whatever. And the way to do that is using what is called a data stream. So if I move over to my Adobe Experience Platform environment again, you see here that I'm going into the data collection data streams bit. And if I just open this up, and look at the first one, MCOSA, that is my app, then you see that I can actually look at my data stream configuration. I can take a look at the edit screen of that data stream and see that the event schema that I've used is the event schema that I've defined earlier in my first step. And if I go out of this and add service to it, then one of the services that I would like to add is what is called the Adobe Experience Platform service. And I can configure that platform service in such a way that also data is moved into other event datasets. Like for example, the push tracking experience events will end up in a specific dataset, as well as push profile data ends up in the Adobe Journey Optimizer push profile dataset, so that Adobe Journey Optimizer can also leverage that data. And here I can select and check various buttons to make sure that with that data that we are sending from the edge into platform, other capabilities are also enabled. And you can read upon this in all the documentation that we have set out for you. But the data stream part is an important element, and like I said, you can send also your mobile data that is landing on the edge network to other solutions, like for example to Adobe Target, or add additional services here from your box here, so that it ends up in, for example, event forwarding to move events to an event forwarding solution in Adobe Data Collection, etc. So there are capabilities there to make sure that the data landing on the edge then is transported, is routed to other solutions. So that is the second bit of that I would say data foundation piece that you need to take care of. And the third step is actually, I would say, a very important one, and that is the Adobe data collection part of the whole setup. That is really where you have to define both an app service as well as an Adobe property, an Adobe Tag mobile property, so to speak, which basically defines the extensions and the data elements and the rules. And the importance of that will come, clear when we're moving into the later part of this session. But for now, let's first revisit what is required from that angle. So first, you have to create a property. And as you see, we have set up this specific property for the app that we have created, called MCLs Demo Systems Mobile. And then we have added a couple of imported extensions to this property. First of all, the Adobe Network Platform as Network, the Adobe Experience Platform as Network extension, and you need to configure that properly. So when you configure this extension, you actually have to make sure that you are using the correct sandbox. In this case, it's the sandbox on the Experience Platform International Organization. And the sandbox is called AEP Enablement Fiscal Year 22. Maybe some of you have used this for enablement purposes in the past. And then you also have to select the data stream that we connected earlier, or that we set up earlier, to make sure that extension is talking to the right data stream to actually forward properly the data. So that's the first thing. You can do this for each of your environments, your development, production, and staging environment. But that is the first extension that you need to configure. A second extension, because we're using Journey Optimizer to kick off a couple of journeys as part of the interaction in the app and allowing us to send push notification, you need to use and set up also the Adobe Journey Optimizer extension. And if you configure that one, what you will see is that you have to select the event datasets to ensure that push notifications are tracked properly using the Adobe Journey Optimizer push tracking experience event dataset. And again, you can set up your own dataset here in your own schema to collect that data. But here we're using the out of the box as part of our demo dataset to select that here. But here, if I click on, you see that I have a number of datasets that I can select from. So that's another thing that you need to configure as part of the second extension. You have the Adobe Journey Optimizer Decision extension. There's nothing to configure here, so I won't go into that. There's the AEP Assurance extension. I would definitely recommend you install that one, because at the end of this session, we will use Assurance, formerly known as Griffin, to actually check whether our app is behaving properly and is using all the right extensions, and etc. etc. So I would definitely recommend you to install that extension so that we can make use of the facility. We are using consent to configure consent as part of the mobile property, the identity as well. And again, you can click on each of them and see what is configurable in that sense. Here you can actually say that the default consent can be of various levels. I made it very easy for me that we straight away we can collect events, but you can use some different capabilities here. And if I go into the identity configuration, you can actually nothing configure there. So that is pretty easy and straightforward. The mobile core extension is definitely something that you also need, and the profile extensions. Whenever you create a mobile property, by the way, any of those two, your mobile core and profile, will be automatically inserted as extensions anyway. So you get them out of the box. And again, each of them are configurable. Here you can actually, specify your Experience Cloud ID, but most of the time, that is pre-populated already correctly. But you can also set session timeouts here. And if you go into that final extension profile, then you cannot configure anything. It's just there to make sure that the property is behaving properly, so to speak. Then there's the final one, the Places one. We will come to that later on, but it's actually, allowing you to configure that point of interest library that you configure in a later stage of whatever I'm not going to explain to you. And, as you can see, we are connecting or using a library called MCLSA, the name of the app, and we have created a couple of point of interest into that library. But again, we will come to that later on and make sure that you understand what is the behavior there. So these are the extensions. Then obviously you can configure a number of point of interest or a number of data elements, and I've basically in my setup, focused a little bit on point of interest. So you see here point of interest for category last entered and last exited, etc. And the nice thing about those point of interest data elements is that if I configure them, I can make straight away use of the Places extension, as you can see. So whenever I create a data element, I can actually refer to what extension I could make use of, like the mobile core extension or the profile extension. But in this case, I'm using the Places extension, and then I can actually define, any of the elements that are associated with the point of interest, the category, the city, the country. And whenever I define any of them, I can then also pick whether I should, look at the current point of interest data, the last entered point of interest data, or the last exited. So I've done this, just to simulate in a later stage, the behavior from the app and see what's happening when I click any of those geofence events. I also have collected the app ID, that is just, a mobile core property. And what I also have done is I'm collecting the profile ECID for a purpose later on, and the test profile. And the test profile is an attribute that can be either true or false, where we can actually make use of when we want to update the profile attribute test profile. Test profile is a profile attribute that you can use for testing journeys in Adobe Journey Optimizer. And we are using this value, this data element, to actually flip that value in our profile attributes. Again, you will see that later on when we go into more details of the app. Finally, when you've specified those data elements, obviously, you go into your rules, and there I've basically specified just a couple of rules here: the app foreground and app background rule. These are very simple to configure. Mobile core has an element and understanding, that whenever the event type is foreground or background, it will fire something and signal. And if I, look at the POI entry, then I basically can again look at the Places extension and see whether there is an entry into a point of interest. Nothing there to configure, very straightforward. And as part of my rule, what I then do is I actually, let me go back into the rule. I actually send a postbug call to a webhook to actually indicate the details of that point of interest. And again, we will show that and see that later on, how that behaves. So that's all that I need to do, obviously from a data collection perspective and setting up my tag. I then obviously, don't want to go into details here, need to publish this, make the property available in the cloud. And the final bit that is also very important is, that I then use the environment details to later on set up my app. But we will revisit that when we get to the app details. So we have set up almost everything from a data perspective. The final bit that I want to do is setting up what is called the app service. The app service is actually the definition of the app itself into our, into our infrastructure, so to speak. So I've set up here an app service called Ansiosa, and the thing that you need to do from that angle is you actually need to define for your Apple iOS and or for your Android the details that are necessary to actually, use push notifications for this app. So you need to, bring in your push notification P8 file in case of Apple, and we are focusing on Apple at this and Swift and iOS for this session. But for Android it will be something equivalent, and you need to then specify some details that are very Apple specific to ensure that you've configured this app service properly. And when you've configured this app service properly, then you can, use it later on in Adobe Journey Optimizer. So that is from a data perspective all that you need to do, and it might still look like a lot, but let's just revisit again. So you set up your schemas in your data sets. Make sure that you collect the data that you want to collect from your mobile app. Ensure that you set up your data stream so that whatever the data or your mobile app is sending into the Adobe Experience Ads network is really forwarded properly to Adobe Experience Platform and maybe to other solutions. And then you set up your AEP data collection mobile tag property with the extensions that I visited, the rules and the data elements, so that your mobile app will behave according to whatever you have configured there. And you also define your app service for your specific app, so that push notification enablement is taken care of. So that's for the data bit. Let's now move to the more, I would say, marketeer part that marketeers could potentially do. And again, I don't want to sit on anyone's chair here. You can do this all by one team or other teams or whatever. It's just to make sure that we can separate a little bit of the responsibilities whenever you need to define and build a mobile app using the Adobe Experience Platform. So that's what for me the more natural preparation. So the marketing foundation. Let's visit that. The first thing that we can do is set up Places. We talked about Places already as part of the extensions, where we actually configured the Places extension and configured it in such a way that it would make use of a library that we set up in the Places service. And that is exactly what we are going to do right now. So if we move over here and go into the Adobe Places service, what I can do here is I can create point of interest, also make sure that they are part of what a so-called library. So if I click on over here, I've selected here a specific library for my app called Mciosa. And then I've defined just simple point of interest. And this is like a very intuitive interface. I can just basically define a name, to which library it belongs, the radius, color, icons, etc. I can then define locations, like details about city, etc., longitude and latitude, and I can also add additional metadata. And for the purpose of the app, what we have done is that we've added a couple of metadata fields here. One is for the entry orchestration ID and another for the exit orchestration ID. And that basically means that this ID will be used to kick off a journey whenever we enter a point of interest in Adobe Journey Optimizer journey, so to speak. And the exit orchestration ID will actually kick off a journey whenever we exit a point of interest. Potentially that could happen. And then I also use country code as an additional metadata. You can go, I would say, wild with those metadata, but you can add any kind of data that you want here. And then whenever you have defined those point of interest, they are available to use in your app and also available to use from your mobile property. And again, we will get to that. The next bit, we go back into my slides. The next bit that we want to cover is Adobe Journey Optimizer. And there is a lot to cover there, because what we want to do is we want to actually send push notifications using Adobe Journey. So we want to, make sure that within the app we can actually trigger events. Those events are, events that we send to platform, but are listened to by Adobe Journey Optimizer, by the events that we have defined on the Journey Optimizer side. And then as a result of those events, being triggered in Adobe Journey Optimizer, we kick off a journey that sends a push notification to the app. And exactly, that is what we're going to look at. And also look at what, the offer decisioning capability of Journey Optimizer can help us with the app in terms of personalization. But let's first look at the elements of building a journey and kicking off a journey as part of your interaction with the app. So in order to do that, we go first into Adobe Journey Optimizer. And before we do anything, what we need to do is set up a channel surface. Because, when we build a journey and we want to send a push notification as part of our journey, we need, that activity that defines the push notification, make sure that it connects to our app in a proper way. And that is where the link between Journey Optimizer and the channel service, the definition that you make, and the app service that you have defined in Adobe Data Collection, where you actually have, specified your push notification details, your P8 file, etc., that you got from Apple or other things that you got from Android are being connected to each other. So if I look into channel service, you see here my Mciosa definition, and there you can see that I can actually give a name, I can see what kind of channel it is, etc. Now this is all being already selected because I cannot change it, but let me just start one from scratch so you can see it. I can give it here another name called Mciosa2, for example. Select that this will be a push notification channel, then say what kind of app I want, and then I can click that app service name that I defined in Adobe Data Collection. So here I make the connection between whatever app I'm going to use in Adobe Journey Optimizer with whatever app I defined in my data collection. I'm not going to finish this one off, but you see how that works. So that is the first step that I need to do, because otherwise, whatever push notification I define work. I need to make sure that that is set up properly. And the next thing that I need to do is I need to configure my events that are being sort of triggered in the app and make sure that they can be catched up by Adobe Journey Optimizer, and then kick off a journey. So for my app, I created a couple of events for the app, I should say. Let me just see if the screen will come here. There we go. So if I select also a little bit. There we go. We have a test push event so that we can send a test push notification from the app. We have set an app log in event so that whenever we log into the app, we send a welcome notification. And then we have a geofence and a beacon event. So let me first check, the test push event. The definition. As you can see, very limited fields are selected here. The important thing that you need to know here is obviously, and hopefully you are aware of that, is this important, campaign orchestration event ID. This ID is making the connection between whatever, event I'm kicking off from my mobile app, making sure that it's been, kicked off by Adobe Journey Optimizer. So whenever I'm sending, by a click on a button in my app, a specific event, I'm using this orchestration ID as the unique identifier to make sure that this specific event is kicked off in Adobe Journey Optimizer and then triggers the journey. For the beacon event and the geofence event, I've added a lot more data. As you can see, 95 fields, because here I want to collect, as part of the event that I'm sending from the mobile app, all kind of, place context details like the POI interaction, etc., so that I can actually use that POI information as part of my app and as part of the journey that I'm sending the push note. So these are the events that I've created, and now that I've set up those events, the next step that I can do is I can actually, create my journeys. Let me see where they are. There they are. So the test push notification journey is pretty straightforward. Actually, all those journeys are pretty straightforward because, this is not Adobe Journey Optimizer session. It's really about the mobile app. But just to see how this works, and whenever that journey comes alive, there it goes. It basically listens to this Adobe or just a test push event, as you can see, and then it kicks off a test push notification, which is very simple in terms of content. Just saying, hey, this is a test push notification. So don't want to spend too much on this. If I go back into my my journeys, the other journey that is a little bit more interesting is the one for the geofence event. If I open up that one, then you will see that the journey itself will make a distinction between whether it's entry or a geofence exit event, and then we will also use some of the details of the event to display properly in the push notification. There we go. So here you see that we are getting the event in by clicking on something in the app. We are then checking what is the type of event. Is it a geofence entry or a geofence exit event? And if it's an entry event, we are then sending this push notification into the app. And if I look at the added content here, you will see that we are using, as part of the definition, a lot of the context of the journey in terms of the point of interest details, so that we can display, for example, welcome to this Luma store in Amsterdam as part of the push notification. All the data is traveling with the event, kicked off by the app into platform and then into Adobe Journey Optimizer, and making sure that we can leverage it into our push notification. So that is, in a nutshell, what we need to do from Adobe Journey Optimizer perspective. Let me see where we are in the slides here. Channel services we've covered, events and the journeys we've covered. The final bit that we want to make sure and make use of in Adobe Journey is a set of offers. So set those one up over here. As you can see, I've created a number of offers. Limit this a little bit to the MCOSA screen. There is an offer for different products here, and there's also a fallback offer, as you can see. So there's an Aero Daily Fitness Tee and a firm water bottle, and so on. I've put those in a collection. So everybody familiar with offers knows how this works. The collection actually is making up those different offers, and then as part of a decision, I've created and make use of that collection. And you can see if I open up this decision here, I'm actually using that collection and also my fallback offer in case that offer will not result in a proper offer. Here you also see that I can copy details like the decision scope and the placement ID that I need in a later start. So if I copy this one over and I open up a text file here and paste this one in, you will see that this decision actually results in the definition of activity ID. You can see over here, as well as the definition of the placement ID. And those I've used in my configuration file, but you can use it in any way you want. Here you see that in the configuration file as part of my decision configuration. Here's the activity and here's the placement. And I have also set up my app in a little bit in a flexible way so that it actually returns only 2 of the offers. And again, you can make this happen and build any way you want. We get to that when we go to the app implementation. The thing that you need to understand is there is no priority different in any of the offers, so we will randomly pick 2 of the 3 offers here. But you can make this behave any way you want using the offer decision capabilities that is available as part of Adobe Journey Optimizer. Okay, final bit for everything foundation-wise that we need to do is setting up, Adobe Target. So we want to also have some personalization happening as a result of an Experience Target activity, just to show you how we can actually integrate with Adobe Target as well from the mobile app. So we've set up also an Adobe Target Experience Targeting activity. That was a mouthful, but you hopefully do understand what I mean with that. So if I go into my activities here, you see that I've created an Ancio Saluma Experience Targeting activity. And if I open that one and click on the Edit Activity, everybody familiar with Target knows that for mobile, you cannot use the Visual Experience Composer. You really have to use the form-based editor here. You can define whatever location name you want to do. And then in this case, I've used the JSON data, as structured as this. So it takes a title, a text, and an image. And by the way, this is exactly the same definition that I use for offers. So the offers that I create in offer decisioning are exactly structured away, similar. They are structured as JSON, simple JSON, text elements that consist of a title, a text, and an image attribute, so that you can easily change and modify that. Again, you can make this more complex, etc., any way you want. So that is the target bit, and of course, you need to set up this targeting activity live, and then it's all there for you to grasp. So going back into my drawing here, we have actually covered everything in terms of setup to actually use within our app. So we've set up the data foundation with schemas datasets. We set up the data stream so that data flows from the app into Adobe Experience Platform and any other solution. We have then set up our property with rules, extensions, and data elements so that whatever we do in the mobile app talks to that mobile property and maybe just make some behavior that we want it to be. We've set up an app service for push notification. Then we defined places. We've defined everything in Journey Optimizer to make sure that push notifications would result back into our app, as well as offers for personalization capabilities. And then we also set up an activity in Adobe Target. So the final bit that we need to do is the implementation bit, obviously. So that's what we will focus on for the remainder of this session, and we'll leave it open until I would say 5 minutes before 12 for a couple of questions that maybe are resulting from this session, and maybe we are finishing earlier. Let's see. So from the app's perspective, the first thing that we need to do is obviously we need to import the packages and import everything that is needed to make sure that an app that we are creating either in Apple or in Android can talk to the mobile SDK in a proper way. And we are sort of helpful there. If you again go into your Adobe Experience Platform data collection environment, you see that you have here different environments. And if you click on this icon over here, you will get information on how to set up your app. First and foremost, this environment file ID is pretty important, I would say. It's almost like the link between your app and whatever you have defined in an Adobe Experience Platform data collection. Is actually, the way to get all that information in terms of extensions, data elements, and rules, to use from within your app. So this environment file ID is crucial. You can copy it over, and then you see, a couple of scripts that you can use, import statements and dependencies for Android, as well as, a structure of your initialization code for Android, and you can do the same for iOS if you want. If I go into my app or the app that we developed, we did it actually a little bit different. So we just used Swift Package Manager to include the various, I would say, libraries or extensions that we needed to integrate. And you can find all those extensions also on our GitHub pages. So here you see an example of the mobile core iOS extension that you can find and then add to your code using Swift Package Manager. So there are various ways to do that. We just volunteered for making use of Swift Package Manager. But if you look at what we are recommending from a mobile launch perspective or the data collection perspective, is that we're using, for example, for Apple, we are using CocoaPods. So again, you can see whatever fits your needs and your requirements there. But ultimately, it means that you need to bring in all those extensions into your app, like for Places, for the identity, for the consent, for the assurance, that we talked about, for messaging, to make sure that it works with a journey optimizer, etc., etc. And all those extensions are documented on the GitHub pages that I sort of linked you to. So, with that being said, then the final thing is, if you have brought this all into your code, and you can see them all here as package dependencies underneath here in the left rail in my Xcode project. And again, apologies for everybody using Android or React or any kind of other platform. We're using here Swift UI and iOS as an example. But I promise that we will not focus on the very specifics of those platforms or technologies. The API calls that I'm going to demonstrate here are pretty, similar for each of those environments. Go into our API documentation, you will notice that as well. But anyway, I've actually brought in the various package dependencies here. And then the first bit that you need to do is, whenever you are starting up your app, is obviously do the proper initialization. So in iOS, that's happened using app delegate, a struct. And there you actually, import the various libraries. And what I really want to make sure that you understand here is that in this case, I'm using a sort of a default configuration value for keeping track of the environment file ID. Remember that environment file ID that I pointed you out to in Adobe Experience Platform data collection, that link, that ID that linked your app to Adobe Experience Platform data collection. You see over here, this call, mobile core configure with app ID, is the relevant call that you need to do. So you're asking with the configure with API call on mobile core, you're asking the app to connect to your data collection property that you've set up with the extensions and the rules and the data elements, etc. Then I'm basically setting up a little bit of consent things, but that is pretty not, I would say, very privacy sensitive. And I'm also using here, in case for Apple, I'm using a sandbox environment for push notifications. That is again typical for Apple and might be different for Android. And then also, again, I need to register for push notification. And I know for Android that is going to be a little bit different with using Firebase or other platforms. So I don't want to dwell too much into that. What is actually important is that as part of, connecting your mobile app with that property, that you also register your extensions. And again, this is similar to Android, iOS, or React, or any other kind of platform. you definitely need with Mobile Core, you need to register your extensions that you have imported with the app so that the app can really make use of it. So that is basically setup of the app. So then whenever you launch the app is fully aware of the mobile SDK. It uses the configuration that you've set up in Adobe Experience Platform Data Collection to actually behave like you have defined over there in terms of rules and data elements. Let me go back and show you the app so that we can take you through a couple of steps here in the app and show you how that behaves. So the first thing that you want to do maybe is associate in the app an email or a sort of an identification with the ECID that is automatically provided by whenever you register the app with the platform. So that's an important remark that I make here. So whenever you launch an app that is sort of instantiated with the mobile SDK, you will automatically get provided an ECID. There are ways to reset that ECID, but I would basically say if you want to get a new ECID, a new profile, making use of your app, you better reinstall it because there are other identities that are being part of that mobile app experience, like for example your push token ID that still might want to sort of connect older profiles with newer profiles. So if you really want to start with a new profile from scratch, you better remove the app and reinstall the app, or figure out a proper way to do that. So let me go back. We have covered this, yeah. So we go into a sort of a registration sequence. So in the app that is facilitated by actually providing you with an email address and then stitching the email address to the ECID. And I will take you through that experience. So I can click on the icon over here, and then I can sort of pre-fill an address here and then say login. And then when that happens, I'm now logged in with an email address, and my email address is now associated with this ECID. So how does this work in the app? In the app, what I've basically done, or what we have done, was we have created in the login sheet here a call to a Stitch API call, and we've sort of wrapped that Stitch call into a service struct where all those relevant API calls are made. And if I go into my Stitch, you will see that here we actually sending a login event. That login event is actually using that the orchestration ID for kicking off my app login journey that I've defined in the Adobe Journey Optimizer. So as a result, I will see a welcome push notification. I'm using here the simulator, so that doesn't work, but if I would use a definitive app, it would use. And what I also will do is I'm also calling here another API call that I've created myself, but that is a wrapper for other API calls, and that is this one, update the identity with email attributes. And here you see that I'm actually filling up a profile map. I'm updating some user attributes, and I'm actually adding as part of all those the email attributes as part of the identity map, and then update my profile with that specific identity information. So this is how I make sure that the email address as part of this experience in the mobile app is then stitched with that ECID, and they are now belonging to the same profile. So the next thing that you want to do in the app, as we showed you earlier, is we want to have some interactions with products. As mentioned before, in this scenario, we are loading products from a JSON file, but the interaction themselves, like for example, I click on the arrow fitness daily. This event by itself, showing this page, will kick off a product view event. And whenever I select this one, it will create a product add to list event. And whenever I do this, it will create a product purchase event. All those events are again set up in the app. And if I go into my screen here, I can actually look at, for example, into the product view event. You see at the task of loading the screen, so loading this specific screen here, we are calling a send product view event API that we've set up as part of our AEP service layer. And if I look at that specific event, let me see some product view event. The only thing that I'm taking as the input is the ECID, because that's the profile that I want to send this event for, and I'm using all the product details here. And then, and this is pretty relevant, I think, as well, what you will see here is that I construct a payload based on a experience event payload struct that I set up in my app. Now, this is a way of setting up your experience events and sending them off from your app in, I would say, a very type-safe way. So if I go into experience event payload, just to make sure that we're on the same page here, you see here a struct actually built according to your schema that you've set up as part of your initial setup of the environment. So here you see a struct that is actually, completely in sync with all the data that you want to collect as part of that interaction and conforming to the schema that you've set up in. The beauty of this is that it is really, I would say, very type safe. I would almost say the downside of this is obviously that if something changes in your schema, you need to adapt your code and make it behave differently. So there are alternative ways to do this. So let me see if I have gotten this somewhere in the service. I think it is here. So if I scroll down, here I'm using another way of doing this, send product view event. Again, using the ECID and the product as the parameters. Here I'm basically just using, as you can see, simple dictionary values, like almost like a string, and pasting in the values that needs there to be. And you can argue that even, you can actually configure this payload, so to speak, in a certain way in your app, so make it even more dynamic and making sure that it's more flexible in terms of schema changes as you want. But just so you understand, there are different approaches here. In the end, the payload that you're creating, either through this dictionary method or through the struct method, you actually need to send an experience event into Adobe Experience Platform so that that product view event or that product purchase event actually arrives in Adobe Experience Platform. So that is what's happening here with the send experience event call. And if I look into that, because again, that is a wrapper for the actual event, let me see where it is, send experience event, we see that in the end, we are using the Edge extension as part of our mobile app and sending the event using the experience event payload that we've set it up. And then we can see whatever has to be read. So that's how you send, product, I would say, commerce events into the app, into Adobe Experience Platform, and how that will behave. Let's go into in personalization. I need to rush up a little bit. I see here you see that we are using decision and other capabilities to actually collect the offers from the various offers that are defined in offer decisioning and in Target. You can do that, in the personalization area. And what we're going to do here is we actually are, getting a proposition from the offer decisioning engine, and then also, update those propositions. As you can see, the core extension to use here is optimize. So with optimize and get propositions, we get the propositions that are relevant for the specific profile. So it actually, using that activity ID and that placement ID that we configured as part of our decision in offer decisioning, and then finds for this profile the relevant propositions. There is another call associated with this, which I don't want to go into, but it is update propositions. And that is what you do upfront to first make sure that the propositions for this profile are updated. And with get propositions, you get then the payload of those propositions. And what you in the end get will be that JSON package that I created for each of the offers in order to be displayed here then properly into your app. And the way to display that, it's all up to you from an app purpose. And the same optimized library can also work for a target. The difference with that is that in Target you don't use that placement ID or this activity ID, but you're using your location name that you've set up as part of your target activity. Okay, rush a little bit. Locations. What we have defined in the app is actually, the geolocation bits here. And if I click on this one, it will actually figure out that specific a store that we defined in our point of interest. And if I click then on this one, I can actually send an entry, a geofence entry event and a geofence exit event into the app. So if I go into geofences, you see that we are using the Places API here to get all the nearby point of interest for that specific location on the map that I have had in the app. So that is what Places as an API offers you, gives you easy access. And when I click any of the buttons like exit or entry, I'm actually sending a process region event and also a send geo event. Now that send geo event, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but what it really does, it actually sends an experience event into platform with an experience or an orchestration ID that kicks off any of those push notification journeys for, saying, hey, you are in the neighborhood or you're leaving this specific events area. This process region event might be of interest to you because that is really tapping on whatever I defined in Adobe Launch. So if I go into process region event into my wrapper service and go into process region event, you'll see it's a wrapper for the Places API called process region. What this actually does, it actually triggers, that specific rule that I've specified as POI entry or POI exit. If I go into POI entry and look at the mobile core send postback, this will happen whenever I enter or simulate an entry in a geofence. It will send a payload to this webhook with these details about whatever point of interest data I have collected. Just to show you how that works, here's the POI screen for Amsterdam Luma Store. And if I go into my webhook here and I click on entry, you see that that payload now is arriving here and it's giving me the details about the entry, the Luma Store Amsterdam, etc. So you can see that you can actually make your app behave in such a way that it actually just only corresponds with your mobile property, and then from your mobile property you can do. And the same is valid, from this configuration screen where I've actually, I talked about the test profile update. If I toggle this button, again in my my rules here, I actually kick off a track action API call to ensure that we update that profile attribute in platform and also send the post back to a webhook URL. So if you go into the app again, toggling this button will actually do nothing else. So again, if I go into the app, then calling, if I correct, a send track action. So it only sends a send track action with an action string and some data associated with it. In this case, the Boolean value for test profile, and the action will be like test profile, and then Adobe Experience Platform data collection and everything that you defined over here will take the relevant action to act upon it. So again, hopefully this gives you a little bit of a feeling that you can do a lot in the app itself by calling the APIs, but you can also do a lot by just calling whatever you defined as rules and elements and extensions in Adobe Experience Platform. Okay, let me see. Yeah, we've talked about personalization, we talked about geofence. Beacons are similar as geofences. Final bit that I want to show you is the assurance. So let me see if that works. Final bit is that if you want to make sure that your app is behaving properly, you can go into assurance. And assurance gives you an overview of all the events that are being kicked off. It will allow you to configure or get a feeling of your configuration viewer. It will show you whether your extensions that you're using in your app are properly set up. This will take some time to sort of populate. And what you can also do is you can also test your push notification, see if that really is working. So first we'll validate your setup. And as you can see, everything is correct here. And if I now open up my app here and, and click on send test push notification, I can actually kick off a send to push notification, and if everything is okay, you will see here that the test push notification sent from Project Griffin, the older name of assurance, will show me that my push notification setup is completely okay. So this is also a very, there's a lot more to add to this, but assurance is a very good tool to actually help you make sure that your app is properly set up and working properly with Adobe Experience Platform, with your data collection property, etc., etc. With that, I think we come to the end of whatever I wanted to show you and demonstrate you, and make sure that you got a better feeling of what is capable in terms of making your mobile app working with Adobe Experience Platform and all the solutions in the Adobe Experience Cloud. Okay, I see that there are a couple of questions. Push notifications happens via Adobe Journey Optimizer. Yeah, that's correctly in this setup. You can do push notifications using any service, but for this scenario, we have defined our journeys in Adobe Journey Optimizer with push notifications, and using that setup for app service and channel service, we can ensure that the app finally will receive those push notifications. Will the code of the sample app also be shared? I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that we are working on a curriculum, or sort of a full extended, step-by-step approach of everything that I presented into this tech talk or tech academy as part of helping you to set this up all from scratch. It still is not finished, and also we need to bypass this to the business unit to make sure that it gets the approval that it requires. But if everything is okay, you should expect in the next couple of weeks, months, a sort of a hands-on tutorial to set everything up the way that I presented into this Tech Academy. So hopefully that will happen soon. And I would basically advise you to connect to me over LinkedIn so that I can keep you updated on that one. Then there's a question of how significant is the AEP service? The stitching already happens on AEP, right? Not sure I really understand the question, but yeah, the stitching happens in both places. I think the stitching happens both on the edge and then later also on the platform. So if that is the question, then that is the answer. But otherwise, please reach out to me to give you some more feedback on that. Final question that I see here: are there any guides for creating extensions and event forwarding? I don't think specifically from a mobile perspective. Everything that you can do in event forwarding applies here also. But again, maybe we can come back to that. When we got some internal feedback on that question, get back to you. So with that being said, we have 1 minute left on this session. I thank you all for joining this session. And for sure, this is being recorded. So if everything went too fast, you can actually revisit this in your own speed. And also, like I said, hopefully we will have a tutorial out there in the near future that sort of gives you step by step on how to go through this. Thank you again, and hope to see you on the next Tech Academy. Thank you.